Welcome back to the Football Fitness Federation podcast. This is episode 351. I'm delighted to welcome back to the podcast Mr. Jordan Tyra. How are we?
I'm very good, thank you. Yeah, good to be back.
Fresh with his Caribbean tan.
Just about, yeah, yeah. Don't look too hard. There's a
Kind
sun.
of. Anyone watching on camera will see that Jordan is with Sam Chapman. Sam, how are we doing?
Yeah, very well, thank you. First podcast for me, so excited on this one.
Mate, it's a big one. It's a big one. I'm glad that you came on. Thank you for coming on. Obviously, again, anyone watching on video will see that the lads are down on screen together, both at the Physical Performance Hub down in, I'm going to say Bournemouth, but Jordan, give us exactly where you are.
Yeah, if anyone does know Bournemouth, it's three-legged cross, so it's basically just north of Bournemouth. Still quite accessible from if you're coming across from Southampton, and then sort of into the Dorset area as well. So yeah, just north of Bournemouth is the best way of thinking about it. We're not on the beach, that's for sure.
Class. We're going to dive into the work that's going on down at the facility shortly, especially everything that's been going on recently with off-season, pre-season, all the rest of it. But Sam, just kick us off with a bit about yourself, mate. A bit of background on yourself.
So as you guys said, I'm the lead physical performance coach at the Physical Performance Hub. Bit of a mouthful. I spend half of my time here. I'm also a part-time S&C coach at Bournemouth Uni as well. So sort of when we're in term time, split my time between the two, spend a bit more of the mornings over there working with the teams, working with the scholar athletes and the TAS athletes that come through. And then usually as we get into the afternoons, head over to here, work all the way through into the evenings as most of us S&C coaches do. That's kind of where I'm at the moment.
What about prior to that, Sam? Where did you study? Like, what's been on the lead up to the roles currently?
Yeah, so I studied just down the road at Southampton Solent. Spent 4 years there, did my undergrad, and then went straight through into the first master's program that they were running. That's where I bumped into this one. We both did our internships down at Southampton. I probably took a little bit of an unorthodox route to get into the industry. Had some really good advice when I was in my first year, which was, just be proactive. So started to sort of build up my experience and, get into placements and internships then. Obviously allowed me to just work with a real plethora of athletes across those 4 years. Kind of got to the end of it and just thought, it's a long career that you can have. But I think, people that I had spoke to that were working in professional sport, you kind of get yourself in, and sometimes you can be a little bit stuck in there with the hours that you're working and the commitments that you have to make, which is, great most of the time. But what I wanted to make sure I could do was, experience the world a little bit. So sort of jetted off for 4 or 5 years, did a little bit of traveling, worked abroad. So, spread my time between winters in France, winters in New Zealand, did a little bit of work out in the sun in Greece. And then, came back to the UK just as COVID hit. So obviously then spent a couple of years just, trying to make things work from a kind of a remote scale in terms of, online coaching and sort of more on the personal training side of things at that point. And that just allowed me to, build up a little bit more experience with, I guess, your general population, and still worked with a few athletes over that time. But it tended to be more people that I was friends with or had connections with from, previous clubs. And then, once I found out that Jordan was moving down here to be with Bournemouth, started to catch up a little bit more regularly, got word of the hub opening. And I think by that point, spent 3 or 4 years working with general population in general, commercial gyms, and started to get that itch for, being a part of a team, having, more disciplines around me and working more with elite athletes, or at least kind of academy-based athletes, and just provide them a better service without necessarily just doing your classic 6 a.m. starts in the gym and 8 p.m. finishes. So that kind of brings us to where we are today.
Brilliant. Just on the travel, was that completely separate from your study and the area you went into, the work you were doing? Was that just to sort of pay off the travel, or was there any work like experience you picked up along the way in terms of physical performance, S&C, PT, any work like that?
Yeah, not heaps to do with, the specificities of working in the industry. The first few years were more my chance to kind of grow up and mature. I think when I look at the time when we were at Southampton, probably thought I was mature enough to go and work in elite sport. And now that I kind of reflect back on that, I can see that that was probably quite the contrary. I think probably around that time I was still that, failed footballer that just loved working in football. I was quite fortunate to have internships with Bournemouth first team, and then through into Southampton first team as well. So got to experience the travel, got to experience the pre-season tours, and obviously being around that first team buzz, which was great. But I think once I kind of completed that full internship with Saints, it was, I just want to see the world for a little bit, disassociate myself a little bit from, the typical industry. So yeah, worked through chalets, worked in hotels for a little bit, built up a little bit of experience by, working by myself in a chalet, worked, leading a team in a hotel. That was more, working in France. Got the opportunity then to go over to New Zealand and started working for a ski company called Atomic, where I was basically just traveling around the country, just, talking to the athletes that were associated with that. Setting them up with deals, setting them up with ski opportunities, and that kind of then brought me back, I guess, into the reality of working in elite sport. You're working with athletes such as like Nico Porteous, numerous medals at the Olympics and the sort of Winter Olympics and stuff like that, which is great. And then slowly started to funnel back into what is where we are now. So it was like I said, a bit of an unorthodox route. Not your classic, get into clubs like this guy was and, spend all your years through your 20s doing that. But I've obviously ended up exactly where I wanted to be. So
What did you find with that though, Sam? And I'm sort of pulling this apart for a reason, because I think anyone around that time of coming out of education, like in football especially, a lot of people get led down the path of internships, get experience, get into the role as quick as you can. But I'm interested to pick apart your experience of sort of stepping away from it to come back to it. Did you find that time was a really nice reflective time for you to sort of refigure what you were going to do, whether you're on the right path, and then to go at it?
Yeah, I think so. I think, going through education, I was that last year of university before the tariffs went up. So it was a case of, right, stay in there while it's a little bit cheaper. But obviously that meant for me, it was going all the way through primary, straight through secondary, straight through your undergrad, straight through your postgrad. And I think by that point, as much as I loved playing sport and being around sport, I kind of just needed a bit of time where I said, right, I want to, try something a little bit different. I was always very career driven as we went through education. And I think this was just an opportunity to maybe let my hair down a little bit, experience world beyond sport, and sort of build up some, more life experience, I guess. So I think for me, working in chalets where I had to, take over the whole role by myself, to then, working amongst a small team, to then leading a whole team, it was, even though not necessarily sports specific, it was a great opportunity for me to grow as a person, and obviously build up that experience of working myself, taking on the responsibility of leading a team. So you learn these life lessons that even though they might not have sport associated with it, you can still bring that back to what we do now, working with different athletes, dealing with parents, dealing with clubs, dealing with different roles within clubs and different personnel as well. So yeah, I would say even though it wasn't sport specific as such, definitely built up some really great experience that, I can reflect back on fondly now.
And would it be something you recommend to people at that stage if they're not quite sure of where they want to step into? Obviously, time-wise, it could be a little bit different. They might not go for as long or even longer, but would you recommend people to do it?
Yeah, it's tough. I think, both are great options. I think now that I'm a little bit older, I'd like to say a little bit wiser, but, we'll see what the rest of my 30s brings. I think, I'd have still looked back fondly if I'd have gone down the same route as what Jordan had, moving between clubs and building up experience between different roles. I think I'd have taken a huge amount from that. And I think for someone that wants to do that, absolutely go for it. I would be fully on board with that. I think for myself though, like it's another opportunity. I think if you want to try something else, there's nothing to say that if you've been proactive through university, and you've built up a bit of a network that you can come back to at a later time. I appreciate it's difficult to get into a club if you've been away from a club for a while, because I think there's an element of the sort of snowballing effect where you build up those relationships, you get recommended from one person to the next, and that might actually, get you the position that you want with a different club even before you go through the application process. Whereas if you're coming off, a bit of a 2-3 year hiatus, then it might be a little bit more difficult. But I think at the same time, you've got to do what you feel is right for you. And like I said, reflecting back on probably my maturity levels at that point, I think if I had gone down the club route, I'm not sure I'd have ended up where I am now. So yeah, I think both good options. I think you just have to choose what you feel is right for you at the time.
Really interesting. Really interesting. I think the different routes are interesting as well. Like I said, I don't think there's one route that's going to suit absolutely everyone, is there? So I think it's important for us to expand on that. And with the two of you sat there taking different routes, ending up in a similar-ish position now, it's interesting. Jordan, talk us. I'll bring you in now. Just in terms of, obviously, Sam's mentioned about going away, staying in contact. When the opportunity came up to come down and work at the hub, that's when he's taken it. What, from your perspective, was it an easy decision to get him in?
Yeah, 100%. I think Sam's been very humble there as well, I would say. But yeah, when I left my full-time role at Bournemouth in 2023. So at the back end of that season is when I formed the Physical Performance Hub, created a limited company and all that sort of stuff. May 2023 was when the company was formed. And because obviously I was back in Bournemouth, got back in touch with Sam. So yeah, like you said, we used to live together when we were both at Southampton on our full year placement. And so I'd known him, stayed in touch, sort of thing. And then obviously when I was then down in Bournemouth for the Bournemouth role, we got in touch and we chatting. And then as I was planning on leaving and planning on creating the hub and all this sort of stuff, sort of mentioned it to Sam, like, this is something I'm thinking about. Would you be interested? And he was like, yeah. And obviously Sam was, like he said, he was coaching already a fair few athletes he knew and general population stuff as well. And I think he was sort of planning on, let me just see how things go. And then I think it was probably about 6 months after, because he sort of came on board after it was starting to get going, but we were still pretty young in the journey, weren't we?
About 14 months, that was nice.
Yeah, so it was one of those where I sort of ran it all by Sam when it was starting to get going, because the creation of the company, so the company in May, but we didn't open our doors because we didn't have a facility that was ready to go until December of that year, 2023. And we started from scratch, no clients, nothing in the area, but we had a great team. And as soon as I started the hub, unfortunately, some great staff I work with at Bournemouth who are still part of the hub now, Liam and Fran. So Liam's our nutritionist and Bournemouth's nutritionist, and then Fran, our psychologist and Bournemouth psychologist. So, and I should say, Dr. Francesca Dean as well. She's just passed her PhD as well. So she'd kill me if I didn't mention that. So I knew, and we had a sports therapist in Matt Best as well, who was obviously on the Pompey episode with those guys. Some brilliant staff that I knew through Bournemouth. We created a team, but sort of I was the only sort of major full-time S&C coach at the time. We'd also brought on other staff, Joe Linley, who's head of physical performance at a very fancy private school called Bryanston down here as well. So we'd started to create this team, but I knew I needed somebody who knew the area very well, had been there, done it in football. First team at Saints, first team at Bournemouth. You get it by doing that. And then Sam didn't even mention as well. Like I say, he's too humble. He was sort of head of physical performance at Salisbury and helped them get promoted to National League South as well. So
Someone else, Sam.
Kept that one quiet. Yeah,
kept a later part of the journey, that one.
Kept that one quiet, but it was cool because I knew he had first team experience at top elite level. I knew he was still working with athletes as well, remotely and in person. And then he was working in non-league as well. So it just made full sense. He knew the area, working with players around here. I knew basically when I created the hub, I knew I just needed the best sort of coaches I could get my hands on, people who I knew, people who were trusted. That when we're going day to day with athletes, doesn't matter who it is, I know they're going to give the best service absolutely possible. So if it's not me, it's Sam. If it's not Sam, it's Liam. It's not etc. etc. So it was really important for me and the hub in general that we had sort of the best coaches in the area available for athletes that we could support them, and it was a no-brainer really to bring Sam on board. And I will say, I'm not just saying it because he sat next to me, but since he's come on board, how long has it been now since he properly sort of officially?
Yeah, just over a year.
Just over a year, and the hub has gone from strength to strength. And what I would definitely say, going back to Sam's early journey, and being abroad and traveling and things like that, and also working more with general population because he's done that more than I have. Like you said, I've sort of bounced around the clubs and more clubs than Tiger Woods, as I like to joke. But like that time spent just coaching and personal training and being in those environments, you pick up a load of such vital skills. So Sam's eye for detail on social media is outstanding. How you portray yourself, how you sell yourself, how you basically, because that's what personal training, that's what coaching, that's what this industry is. It's all about how you are selling us as coaches to athletes, to people, to general population, whatever it is. He can do this in abundance, and it's what he's brought to the next level of the Physical Performance Hub. So I'm 100% grateful for him being here for sure. And it just means now that I think, I don't want to call it the product, but the services we provide to athletes is much more complete because we have a full team. It essentially, the best way I describe the Physical Performance Hub, who hadn't heard me bang on about it before, is we're just a private sports science and medicine department. And funny enough, when you actually look at the number of staff we have, so we have me and Sam sort of coaching, most day, every day sort of thing. We have two other S&C coaches, one called David, who's he's head of physical performance at Leaf School, a brilliant school down here as well, sort of a sports specialist school, but also part-time S&C at Southampton. Like I said, Joe, who I mentioned already, he's head of physical performance at Bryanston School. Very, very fancy sports, sort of becoming a sports specialist private school. So there's four sort of S&C coaches or physical performance coaches. Liam, our nutritionist, also Bournemouth Academy nutritionist. Dr. Fran Dean, the psychologist for us and Bournemouth. And then Matt Best, who's our sports therapist and rehabber as well. So if you actually look at that as a staff cohort, bar sort of your registered physio, which would obviously be required for EPPP rules, that is basically better than nearly every, I would say, Cat 3 academy in the country. So if we say basically, let's just imagine we plucked a registered physio out the air right now, we would be basically Cat 2 standards sports science and medicine department with nutritionists and psychologists and 4 S&C coaches basically. 2 pretty much full-time, 2 part-time. You actually think of that staff structure now, that's a really, really strong structure. So that then allows us to provide just, in my opinion, outstanding service for athletes, and it's massively gone to the next level since Sam's come on board.
Yeah, and I think on top of that note, I think spending hours working as a personal trainer in commercial gyms, no matter who the personnel is that you're working with, there's always going to be this limitation where, because you are the brand, if you're lucky and you've built up multiple disciplines within yourself, you might be able to provide sports massage, you might be able to provide nutrition, but there's always going to be a limitation, I think, on how much you can provide. And I think I really felt over the years that kind of desire to be able to offer more to athletes. I didn't want to have to refer people out and wait for 2 or 3 weeks to get a response and then bounce them to someone else, where I think just the information gets lost, and I think the service reduces as well. I just had this itch where I just wanted to be a part of a team where we could provide everything in-house, whether that is, the pro athlete getting a little bit more time, a little bit more attention to kind of work on the MDT elements that they might get at their club. It could be the semi-professional athlete that maybe has, a physio at their club. Maybe they have a uni student coming in and providing a bit of GPS metrics, but they're probably missing something there, whether that's the psychologist or whether it's the nutritionist. But then also, you go right down to your grassroots level and you say, well, yes, they might not play to quite the same level of intensity as your top tier athletes are, but they still go through the same physical demands. They still have the same injury risks. They still have the same issues in terms of family life and social life. So it's being able to provide access in one place that we can help everyone, basically. And I think, being a part of a team where you can say, that's probably not my strength. I can refer, people onto Jordan if it's something to do with ACLs, for example, or if someone's having an issue at home with their brother or sister, if they're a young athlete, I can refer them onto Fran to talk about how she can support what we do in here. If someone's picked up an injury at the weekend, rather than me going, the classic PT route and just trying to word my way through it and give a little bit of a suggestion and maybe just, not quite have the right answer, I can refer them onto Bestie in-house, and then, ultimately the athlete gets the better service.
I think it's really interesting hearing about how both of you sort of started on the similar route, gone apart, and then come back together. And obviously Jordan has been the director of the company, and yourself coming in as a head in the head role now, Sam. I think it's really interesting hearing about the roles and the sort of reasons and the trust between you of coming back together. And I know that sort of stretches out to the wider team as well. Let's dive into some of the work that you guys have been doing recently, because obviously as we record this, we're getting to late July. So a lot of time has been spent, I know, on off-season programs. So give us a little, Jordan, I'll start with you. Give us a little summary of off-season so far. I know a lot of players now might be back in pre-season, but how's the off-season gone?
Yeah, off-season was busy. Like I mentioned at the start of the sort of bonus episode we put out with my Caribbean trip. Literally just before I flew out there, we'd done six weeks worth of off-season camps. Which, like I said on that episode, if anyone's run off-season camps before, they're full on. So to run 6 weeks for the first time, we've done it as well. And again, I couldn't do it. I couldn't have done that by myself. I needed Sam. So again, without him, it wouldn't have been possible. And again, through his links with the university. So we used a facility called Chapman, which is Bournemouth University's sort of sports facility. Unbelievable sort of brand new artificial 3G pitch, which is, class. Like facility wise is fantastic. And a brilliant, it's got like a little Astro area just off the side where we marqueed it up, got all the gym equipment out, had beds out. So we had sports therapists on site, a lad called Sonny as well, who helped us out. So we had soft tissue in the mornings, prehab, you basically your usual training day for any athlete, right? And then got out on the pitch, did 2 hours worth of pitch work, individualized as best we could in position specific work. And obviously we've put out a fair few videos on that. And if anyone's interested, feel free to go and check them out. But yeah, videos on what we were trying to do with every player that we had in their positions, trying to make it as position specific as possible. Always fun to say that, in it, position specific. But 6 weeks worth of these off-season camps was a pretty good shift. And we massively undercharged the players for what we were providing. It was a full day's worth of provision with food. So we had food supplied by the Good Prep as well. We provided that to them, and that's sort of no extra cost. Meals every day. And if anyone who's been to one of our events will know that the Good Prep food's nice. Obviously sponsors of Football Fitness Federation and long-time friends as well. So the players received that incredibly well. We had, protein provided for them, waters, you name it. We were doing everything. A very, very, very good rate per day for the players, because it wasn't, for us, the whole point of the hub, it's not about, we're not here to make loads of money. We're here to support athletes, and that's the be all and end all. Essentially, our tagline is complete support for every athlete. And that's why we're here. So off season was that exact opportunity, the complete support, because we all know what it's like having worked with athletes either privately or when you're at a club and you send your athletes away for off season with a program. You sort of like, fingers crossed, you hope they do it a little bit, and anyone who's been on the other side and they are the athlete, they'll be like, oh, this is a bit awkward. They'll just find a random pitch and I'll just try and run and follow this program. We know that we can provide better support for our athletes, regardless of where they're at, what club they're at, if you just have the right people to provide that support for them. And obviously we know a lot of people now in the industry and some brilliant people doing it. Ben Rosenblatt was obviously out with 292 Performance. We know Alan Jordan's out the campus, Tom King, Sam Peeps, loads of people, right? I could name loads of people off the top of my head who run brilliant off-season camps. We wanted to do it down here for the athletes that we know around the area, because we know some brilliant clubs and some outstanding athletes at very good levels who just don't have that support during the off-season. It's like they finish and it's like, cool, see you in pre-season. And unless the athlete is a really driven athlete who's going to go, I want to maintain and I want to be, as outstanding when I step in day one pre-season, that fitness level is going to drop off. They're not going to be ready for that pre-season when it comes in. So that's where we wanted to provide that for them. So 6 weeks worth of camps was a slog, and the weather was terrible as well, wasn't it? For the first 3 weeks, honestly, it was absolutely chucking it down in South Coast, sunny Bournemouth.
Well, I think considering that, June was pretty warm. It just happened to be that every day that we ran the camp, it rained.
Yeah. And
so,
badly as well. Yeah. But it was they were so full on, but the feedback, the players were buzzing, and I just think we finished our last day, or the last day of the camp, we went for a nice little coffee and a brownie. We're not ashamed to say afterwards, and sat down and just reflected and went, we've done something really special there. My God, we were knackered. Like that final week, we were tired, weren't we? We were tired, but it was one of those where you go, if we weren't there, like I said, those players are going to be just running by themselves on a pitch, or they might go with their mates and they'll do half of the program, and they'll probably then just end up playing heads and bowls or something like that. Whereas we know, we're full confident that they were stepped into day one of their pre-season at their clubs and they were feeling top dollar. So that was really good. So off season was busy. Anything you want to add on the camp?
I think it's just making it accessible. Like Jordan said, players will go and find a pitch, which, we all know at that time of year could be fantastic. It could be a pile of sand, and the risk then, I guess, that is associated with that can go up. Again, I go back to what I said, advice that I got right at the start of uni was, be proactive. We know that there's going to be players that want to take their off season and just get away from it, go on holiday, put their feet up in Marbella for 6 weeks. And if that's what they want to do, then that's fine. That's up to them. But, you're going to have some players that are very technically gifted that they might be able to get away with that. Some players realistically will need to do something over that off season in order to, either bridge the gap to where they need to be or take the step to get that a little bit further ahead. And I think for us, just being able to provide the opportunity and make that accessible for them, to come to us, have that MDT around them where we can provide them, like Jordan said, with nutrition, with S&C, with pitch-based sessions, with sports therapy, so that they know they're in good hands. We're fairly experienced between the guys that we had down there. So ultimately they can go back to their clubs knowing that they've had a good off season.
So I want to get your perspective on this, because I think this is just my point of view. I'd love to hear yours. But over the last few years, and I know I've spoken to Jordan about this probably on the podcast as well, we've seen the trend of players doing more work in off-season. And I'll use the example there of players going away and taking the time to chill. I don't think there's many now, is there? There seems to be a lot more players actually utilising the time, maybe not completely to the best that they could, to put it nicely, but they are trying to get working. And I think that seems to have been a trend, especially that I've seen over the last couple of off seasons, is that you're not seeing many players not doing anything and taking the time away. They're all seem to be doing something. What's your perspective on that?
Yeah, I think it's difficult. I think because the seasons are ever changing, the grey area between where does the season finish, where does off season begin, where does off season finish, where does pre-season begin? We're, like Jordan said, we're working with a number of clubs to provide, pre-season testing at the moment. And some of them with, starting their pre-season 3 weeks into our off season. And you're going, okay, all right, we've just got to, we have to work with what we've got, and whether that's down to the leagues changing when they're starting and finishing, which is largely out of our control. But I think we can only do what we feel is best to provide the athletes with the best service. I think it's a tricky one, because when you've got a lot of self-employed businesses and individuals that are trying to grow their business in similar ways to what we do, you're trying to represent yourself well online, but I think sometimes that can come across in the wrong way, where coaches are maybe not collaborating with clubs. They're not communicating with the players and the players' S&C coaches, especially for those that are playing at a higher level, maybe just because they're friends with them, which is, fine. You can understand why they would train with them, but you're then potentially putting those players at risk where you're not giving them any time to rest. You're not putting their best interest in terms of their development and their recovery over that time, at the forefront of it. There's that risk where it could be, I'm just going to do what I think looks really good. I'm going to run him into the ground because people will then go, he's a great coach or she's a great coach. When actually sometimes that might just leave the player, worse off by the time they come back to their preseason. We're not trying to make players peak at the start of preseason. That's not the point. We're just trying to keep them ticking over, help them work on their reflections from last season in terms of what they want to improve or the weaknesses that they want to eradicate. It's a long season, especially the higher up you go. You look at the highest level now. We've just finished the Club World Cup, and teams are talking about giving pretty much the rest of their preseason to players off, just so that they can recover in time for the start of the season. So, there is a limited window for which, coaches, establishments like us can work with players. And whilst that's great, we still need to be, remembering the fact that players do need to recover, and they need to be at a good position to go back into preseason. There's still time to build through preseason, so you don't have to get them to the best of what they need to be. But ultimately, if we can give them back to their club in better stead, and they feel better for it, and they're happy to come back the year after year, then obviously, for us, that's great.
I think just to add on that as well, what Sam said there is we're in a great position because obviously I've got strong links with Bournemouth, having been there full time for 2 years and still sort of been there part time and contracted since I left my full time role. Liam obviously works with us and works with the players every day. Fran works with us and works with the players every day. So we've got really strong links with Bournemouth. So we see both sides of the coin. So we know exactly what they're doing with the Bournemouth players from a physical development point of view. I know what they were doing week in, week out, because I was seeing them in the week in Bournemouth kit at the club. And then I was working with them, some of those Bournemouth players that we work here at the hub, privately here at the hub. So I can say to them, right, I know exactly what you did on Tuesday because I took that session with you on Tuesday at the club, and now I'm working with you on Friday, and same for Liam and other people. So we're in a very, very blessed position in the players we work with, certainly the ones who are associated with a club like Bournemouth or other clubs as well. We know what they're doing, pretty exactly full on what they're doing. So therefore we know when you go back, this will be what you're doing. This is what you did, last week, whatever it might be. So during that off-season period, we know in depth what they're doing. And I think just to add on what Sam said there, we've also seen the opposite, where we've had players come to us this off-season who have gone off and worked with other coaches who haven't got that nice, strong link with the club or haven't even communicated with the clubs. I'm not going to call out and name names, but, they came to us a little bit broken in off-season, a little bit, if I'm being totally honest. And he walked in through the door and he was like, I'm finished. My legs are finished. And I said, well, what have you been doing? And they ran through the session. And I'm like it. Yeah. So straight away you sort of go in, okay. We're just going to try and undo that work a little bit. So just to add on to that point of what Sam was saying there, we are definitely seeing a trend now. I think we can all admit that private coaches are doing work that looks good, not that is good. And then my question to them, and I don't mean to point fingers or call anyone out, but my question to them is, are you doing that for the player? Are you doing that for yourself? And if the answer is the latter, you're not doing the right thing, in my opinion, for the player, because Sam's hit the nail on the head. Off-season isn't about, if we're talking about periodizing and peaking your performance for certain times of year, it's not off-season. We're not looking at tapering towards peak performance in off-season. Like I said, it's keeping you just maintained, so that the first week of preseason isn't a huge shock to the system. It's that first week of preseason is actually, I can handle this. I can just step into it and as smoothly as possible. Almost like you're stepping off the platform to a nice level platform, not stepping up to a major step. And I think what we're seeing now, and some of the stuff that when we're speaking with players who have maybe tried different coaches in different off seasons and have come in with us in this off season, they go, oh yeah, some of the stuff they're telling you in the stories, they're a little bit horror stories at times. So That's why we're in a lovely position that the clubs that obviously our staff also work with are much more confident that their players are coming with us. So they're very happy that the players are coming with us because we know exactly what's going on with them at the club. And that's a really strong thing. Now, I appreciate not every coach is going to be in that situation. They're not going to also work at the club that player plays for. But just again, it's another call to those coaches who are working privately with players. You need to understand what the players are doing at the clubs. You need to understand what the players, if you're going down individual development plans, or what their goals and aspirations are in terms of, do they want to improve power? Are they looking at improving repeated sprintability? Whatever the club's little sort of action to work on might be, the players' action to work on might be, can you marry that up? Can you at least speak to the club? And so you're all singing off the same song sheet, not, I'm just going to go and do something that looks really cool on Instagram that's going to get me loads of attentions and likes, and then it's going to grow my business a little bit. Because if that's your intention, again, I don't think you've got the player at the heart of everything you're doing. And I think that's just something we've definitely noticed over these last few off seasons, as I'm sure a lot of people listening to the podcast would agree with.
I think the challenge on that though, John, as well, because you've described there that you're in the position of seeing it from both sides, like live as well, because you're in both sessions. But I think the challenge for anyone in the private world is to get that perspective that you're getting from in club, either through the player or the coach. And by that, I mean, spend some time questioning the player, questioning the coaches, building the relationships and having these conversations, because soon you'll learn to understand the picture of actually what's going on. Yes, you're not at the training ground seeing the sessions, but it's not going to take you long to actually find out what's going on and what the plan is. I've had numerous plans sent to me over off-season of players and the things that I've either been doing in club or been told to do in club, and it doesn't take long for you to get that. And if you're not getting that, it's a bit lazy, because it's not going to take you long, and it's literally just conversations. So I think it's a really important point. It's understanding the big picture. And again, I love Sam's point on the role and the target of off-season. And I think it comes back to, again, I've had loads of conversations in off-season about what it is actually for. I think it's a massive opportunity where obviously you're not spending time on pitch. It's not game time. That's going to come. Like, we've got that round the corner. So let's use an opportunity to do all the things that maybe we couldn't do in season, work on things that you've got to work on, utilize this time and get your recovery and ready to go. And it's a really important point. I think you've raised some really, really good points there with off-season.
I think on that note as well is, we obviously come from an S&C background. So predominantly that's what we see on social media. We understand how it comes across from, individuals working at clubs and then allowing their players to go out and work with practitioners. But we also see it then from, the side of the self-employed element, where you are trying to get those players from clubs to work with them, and assuming still that you have the player's best interest at heart. Doesn't have to be that S&C is the only thing that you do. I think obviously us being almost, the team behind the team, the MDT, providing those kind of club provisions, but outside of the club. We spoke about the recovery side there. It might be that a player just reflects more on the psychological side or the nutritional side. And even though they take a bit more downtime, and recover over the off season, they could go and work with, a nutritionist or a psychologist, which obviously we can provide that in-house, which is great. We can then have that communication about, is it a pitch related action that they are struggling with? Do they, every time they get into the attacking third and it's 1-on-1, they're getting nervous about what goes on next. How can we then integrate, the practice of the psychologist with the pitch sessions that we might do? Doesn't have to be just, let's see how big a GPS metrics we can get. Oh, they've run loads. Oh, their sprint distance was great. Oh, they've, got into the tens on their meters per second on their sprint, which is like, they're all good things, but it's time and place, and I think, again, it's reflecting on the season that's just been, actually looking at who is the athlete. Yes, they're a player, but they're an athlete first, and they're a person before that. What do they need as a person that's going to help them to become a better athlete, so that when they do go onto the pitch, they're a better player?
I think context is so important within that, isn't it? And that's where in the private setting, it's a lot easier to do that, because an 18-year-old player compared to a 35-year-old player are going to have very different demands of or requirements maybe of an off-season period, and without even mentioning positions, injuries, and all the rest of it that come into it. So I think it's, again, a really important point. And also it's a time where habits can be built, isn't it? It's a time where you can educate players, where, like Sam said, if it's something around nutrition, recovery, these are all things that are basically preloading you ahead of a season. Like I imagine you've had numerous chats on nutrition and recovery and things like that with players that are going to head into the season. And that's the time when you can get maybe that information in. So you're not spending it necessarily doing all your explosive work and strength work and all the rest of it. That might be included, but there's also going to be really important conversations that go on within that period.
Absolutely. I think you hit the nail on the head there, because if I just think back to some of our camps, we had players from all walks of life, different ages. So we had people who were going into their first year scholar at Bournemouth, and we had people who were going into their second year scholar. So automatically there's differences. But then we also had people who were just about to sign for, I won't say the clubs, but big, like semi-pro clubs, which everyone will have heard of. And so they're on, and he was mid-20 years old, big, strong, powerful athlete. So you kind of go in, they're automatically in that off-season camp. We're on the same camp today. We're providing you, individualized soft tissue, individualized prehab ready for you guys. But then we're looking at getting a session together. We're going to individualize the session for each player and their position and what they need. But, that first and second year scholar, because we know what's going to be going on at Bournemouth in their pre-season, their demands on that session on the pitch is going to be very different from the lad who's just about to sign for a semi-pro team, and, wages and mortgages need to be paid, and he's got family to provide for. They're on very different paths on that exact same day. So if you're just facilitating, like I said, that context is absolutely crucial. And that's why we wanted to know everything about, basically, as much as we could about our athletes every single day.
Yeah, so obviously it's been a busy period of off-season, but now we're into pre-season as well. And I know you guys have now been busy. Things have transitioned into a lot of pre-season testing. So Sam, do you want to give us a little bit of a breakdown of some of the work that you guys have been doing?
Yeah, again, it's that grey zone, isn't it? Like, I'm not actually sure now where off-season finished and pre-season began. But yeah. I remember I went home after that last week of the off-season camp, and I said to the missus, I was like, I should be quieter next week. I'll be around more. And then it just went the polar opposite direction. But no, it's been good fun. I think, for us as a business, obviously we've got two main, communications. You've got the player side, and then you've got also the club side as well. So obviously we've spoken about all of the services that we can provide different levels of athletes, but I think collaborating with clubs as well is also a really key part of how our business grows. So we've just tried to, explore around the clubs that are in the area and essentially raise the standards together by providing them with, accessible testing, so that we can, from our side, we can then compare, step 3 all the way through to step 7, for example. And it just allows us, when we have done testing with them, we can actually give them feedback. I think one of the big bugbearers for me, having worked, in football for a little while and then been out of football, and, Jordan's obviously been in football for a lot longer, it's the fact that testing gets done and then just kind of shoved to the back and forgotten about, which I think, you might as well then have not done it, because what does it really tell you? Unless you're really diving into a bit more of the rehab side, where you can give, really key and obvious, direction as to asymmetries and whatnot. I think if you're just doing the testing once and then not repeating it, not actually doing something with it, then you could argue that that's just a lost training day. So I think the big thing for us is, can we work with clubs? Can we provide them with their base level of, pre-season measures? Go back in then towards the end of pre-season if the calendar allows it to, or can we go back in mid-season and sort of check in to see where they are? And like I said, just raising standards for them, so that, your step 7 can compare to step 6. Your step 6 can compare to step 5, and so on and so forth. If we've got teams from within the same step, we can compare them together, obviously not sharing the direct data, but being able to give them feedback on where they are, obviously Valve just released their data points for the Premier League as well. So we can go, look, you might be step 3 at the moment. This is compared to someone else in step 3. But also, if you want to go right up to the top, this is where the differences lie in terms of physical performance. And I think, so far the feedback's been really good. We've had some great feedback from coaches saying, it's something that they've never had before, or would have previously been inaccessible, too expensive. And I think, that network that you can build up around the area with players, with clubs, and just trying to be resourceful with what you've got. You don't have to have every resource in the world, but I think if you can be really resourceful with what you do have, then it allows us to grow as a business. It supports clubs in the area to hopefully, get promotions or avoid relegations, depending on where they are. And ultimately, I think everyone raises a standard together and benefits in the same way. So
with that data collection, Jordan, has it been quite a linear sort of trend as you go up the steps, or has there been anything that's like stood out?
Yeah, no, it has actually. It's been really interesting for us, just from sort of in-house research point of view, in terms of it provides us the opportunity. So again, we're talking the football pyramid here, and in terms of the step system that we're talking about. So we can sort of say these are semi-pro clubs, but we can say to a step 4 team, you step 3 are scoring this sort of times on their sprint testing. So we just basically follow the Premier League testing protocol. We just add in yo-yo level 2 test for their fitness scoring as well. So then that allows us to basically just compare across the board, step 3, step 4, step 5, step 6, step 7. And we can say quite confidently that each step you go up, the level does improve. And actually, even within the same step, because we've got step 3 teams now, you can see some different profiles of the teams. So one team is actually, again, I'm going to use the word fitness in general quotation marks on a yo-yo level 2. Some people will go, it's not fitness. But whatever you want to argue with it, right? We'll argue that till the cows come home. But all I'm saying is, one step 3 team scored much higher on the yo-yo than the other, but the flip side was the case for sprint testing. So you say the profile of the team, obviously don't share this, by the way, they're quicker than you, they're slower than you, etc. But we can see that there are different profiles within the same step. But then when you look within the steps and between them, there are differences, which is exactly what you'd expect. But having said that, like Sam just said, in terms of the percentiles of what Premier League players get. So we take our 4 stacks to them. We do CMJs. And we then obviously tell them, right, this is the sort of scores you're looking for. This is sort of the top 5% of the Premier League, etc. We had a step 3 player, so it was 59 centimeters impulse momentum on CMJ, which for anyone who's doing impulse momentum, CMJ is not flight time. Just make that point. That's a hell of a jump. That's a hell of a jump of 59. We went, whoa. And we went, right, just do another one just to double check. And then I think he did like a 57.
That's 58 and a 59.
Yeah,
so
yeah.
He beat it. I stopped and I said, Jordan, you need to come over here. Just have a little watch of this. And I think a few players caught eye. I was just, in awe of what's going on.
So. He floated. The guy floated. It was unreal. So, and again, some of the fitness testing scores, because again, I don't think people appreciate the quality of football in semi-pro levels. Like we've got, there's some of the people we've tested in step 3 football, there's ex-Premier League players in there, genuinely, and ex-Championship, ex-international players in these clubs. So funny enough, their fitness levels, even at their ages, obviously they're slightly older in terms of their age now, but their fitness levels are unbelievable on a yo-yo test again. So their yo-yo scores are unbelievable. And some of their fitness, their speed testing, etc., is unreal. So within those levels, there are a hell of a good caliber of player. And just to latch onto what Sam was saying, that those sorts of players are used to a very high standard of support around them. If they've played EFL, if they've played Premier League, if they've played internationally, they're used to having numerous physios, sports therapists, sports massage, sports scientists, S&C, the support network around them. Just because they're playing at a different level of club now doesn't mean they shouldn't have that. And that's where we try and come in and support those athletes. But again, the data is only as good as if you just collected data for data's sake, don't collect it in the first place. What I was saying, we were literally doing it yesterday. And what's amazing is we've done the first team in step 3. and we're doing their under 18s program as well, and potentially going down the academy as well for them, so that we've got a full club support, which is pretty cool. But the point where we was making to them yesterday when we're testing them is that we're here to provide with CMJ data on Force Decks now. You can get a lot of good data from it, and we look at concentric asymmetry when they're pushed in that push off phase in the jump, and looking at which leg they're favouring basically. And we're giving that data back to the any physios that are working at the clubs, but also the players. And we're trying to say to them, like, this is hopefully a touch point for you, that we can identify any asymmetries or any issues within your whole fitness battery of testing before any problems might arise. So, you know, if you can see at the very start of pre-season that your yo-yo score is well behind the rest of you, well, that's a touch point. You need to work on that. Or if you can see that your 5 and 10 meter sprint times are relatively poor, but actually you get going by the 20 and the 30 meter time, you know, maybe we can do some acceleration work for you, and we can look at some power, and we can link that into your CMJ, and all of a sudden we can actually see that, yeah, your push off mechanics aren't great. So that level of support is what exactly, like, if anyone's listening to this and they're based at a club and they're working in a fancy gym with all the gadgets and gizmos every day in a professional environment, that's the sort of stuff that they'll be talking about with their players. But we're talking about in semi-pro or under 18, you know, college sort of basic academy programs. So we're just providing the exact same support, just a different level of football. I think that's a really important point to make. So yeah, very, very busy pre-season. It has been, but just from an in-house data collection point of view, it's been really interesting because, like you said at the start, the step level does change, and it's a really important, powerful tool for us to say to the clubs, listen, if you want to get promoted and you want to play to the next level, the club management and the directors and things are really interested to hear that they go, well, actually, the level, you know, a physical level above you is another step up, and that might be something you need to think about, might be something you need to consider from a player recruitment point of view. Just to have that context and have that data in is very useful for them.
Yeah, I think it's a really good point. Tom King actually spoke about that quite a bit on the podcast when he came on, about their support that they're doing at KPI with the semi-professional clubs as well. So, no, really important point, lads. Let's just wrap things up with the future. What does the future look like for the hub, for the support you guys are doing, maybe looking ahead to next off-season, pre-season? What does that look like?
Yeah, I mean, we're at that point now where we've probably outgrown our facility size, which, you know, is a good dilemma to have. Obviously, we're down in the south of England, so nothing comes particularly cheap when you're looking for slightly bigger sites. But, you know, I think the next big step for us is, you know, looking for a bigger facility, trying, you know, for anyone that does work in a private facility, specifically, you know, tailored around football, you'll know the difficulty of trying to find gym and pitch close to one another. We're quite fortunate that, you know, we're sort of five minutes drive away from, at the right time of year, a fairly decent community pitch. But, you know, when it's dry as it has been, you know, this time of year, you're looking at what looks more like sand than it does grass. And I think then obviously the risk comes up in terms of actually training and trying to get quality training out of it without just, you know, slapping feet on what sounds like concrete. So yeah, the big step for us is going to be facility. And, you know, we've got ideas then of how, you know, our sort of payment structures might work, you know, moving to more like memberships rather than just sort of personal training style packages. You know, I think that's the next big step for us, which, yeah, obviously will allow us to evolve and service more athletes and more clubs and have everything then hopefully in one place in the same way that we can the MDT at the moment. So
basically, Jordan's got to put his hands in his pocket. That's what he's saying.
Yeah, that sounds like it, doesn't it? But yeah, no, I think essentially, yeah, it's what Sam says in terms of, I think where the business has come from is through passion of helping athletes. That's where our background is. We just support athletes and we try and provide them the best level of support as we possibly can. Then what we've got to try and do now is make that a very effective business as well. And that's where I'm definitely a better coach than I am a businessman, and that's where this man's definitely helped. But yeah, it's grown amazingly. I cannot like, yeah, I sometimes drive home and pinch myself going, wow, this is amazing. This is what we're doing. it's just taking it to that next level. Anyone who's in business or run a business knows that you've got to always look at evolving and how you evolve and how you progress. The business model's changed about 4 or 5 times since it first started, because that's natural. That's what happens. And I think what Sam says there, yeah, we've got some nice plans in place, and we're chatting to some people at the minute in terms of how we move on to a site with a pitch. There's some very exciting possibilities for us, which would be really cool. But essentially, what we want the business to look like is a professional setup that you'd have, that you can come to us for your prehab, for your soft tissue work, maybe do half an hour of just some prep work, and then we put our boots on and we go out on the pitch. And that's what the gold standard for us will look like. And then around that, you can get psych support, nutrition support, and everything, which we can do right now. It's just like I said, we're a good size facility, to be fair, just under 1,000 square foot, with physio rooms attached and everything like this. But it's just taking it to that absolute next level, and yeah, that's always difficult. Like Sam says, on the South Coast, it's not the cheapest part of the world, should we say? So yeah, it's grown amazingly, and again, all thanks to Sam as well. There's a lot of things he's brought to the business, and the rest of our team. I've got to mention them as well, because it wouldn't work without them. This isn't just me. This is much bigger than me. So yeah, exciting times ahead.
I think one of the biggest compliments I can give is it feels like 2 minutes since we had a conversation about you setting this up. And
yeah, it does. Yeah,
literally an idea and a call to now all the quality that you've both spoken about on the episode there. So, guys, you're doing amazing work, I've got to say. I haven't been down yet to visit. I definitely plan on doing so.
It's a long way, to be fair, isn't it?
I'm excited to come down and see exactly what you're doing. But no, it sounds incredible. I think people have taken a lot away from sort of off-season, pre-season information that you've covered there. So I appreciate you both going into that. Sam, just wrap us up with, if people want to get in contact with you, give us where's best to go. But then Jordan, give us the hub details as well.
Well, I would probably say everything just goes through the hub now. It's a little bit easier.
Sam, we want you.
Well, this is me now. So I try to disassociate myself from being, just a solo coach now. So yeah, if for those that are on social media, we mostly use Instagram these days. We are on TikTok as well, but I leave that to that dancing for him.
TikTok, bro.
Honestly, we do post on TikTok, but I don't get it. Sammy's very good on social media, I will say. So yeah, but I would say, without not letting him not plug himself, Coach Sam Chapman, isn't it?
Yeah,
Coach Sam Chapman is his personal one, but obviously that links over, and we do all the collaboration and stuff with the hub. So if I'll let you finish off with the
So at the Physical Performance Hub for Instagram and TikTok, and then obviously the website is just going to be the pph.co.uk.
Yeah.
So yeah, they'll be the best 2 places to find us, but you can reach out to either myself or Jordan or the rest of the team. We're all on social media as well. So
yeah, again, just if you just Google the Physical Performance Hub, all the links are on there, and the website and everything like that. It's the easiest way of doing it. But yeah, it's exciting times ahead for sure.
Awesome. Thanks, lads.
Cheers, mate.